I have made a knife. This is the knife. I have learned some new tricks to make this knife, and if you want to join me on this journey and see how I did it, feel free to watch on. One day I woke up and I decided it was time to make a knife. To make a knife, one naturally starts with a 3D model, since I wanted to use my CNC for this as well. I made a model in Fusion. I made some revisions on the model and 3D printed them out after I made them to see how they felt in real life. This is the first attempt, and it felt humongous in 3D, and it was more like a butter knife in reality. So I made a bigger model. Here I am printing revision 4, which was a lot better. I was quite happy with this size, so I made a render of the knife in 3D to see how the knife would end up. To cut the blade to size, I used Fusion's built-in drawing function. I made a A4 printout with a 1:1 ratio and added the measurements so that I could double check it in reality. Spot on. Nice. Originally, I had planned to use an old saw blade, as the one you are seeing in the background right now. But I was lucky enough that the workshop where I work had some spare steel laying around. It was marked with CS 4mm, and we guessed that the CS stood for carbon steel, which I should be able to quench later on. Unfortunately, the steel was not perfectly straight, so I did my best to get it straight again. The plan is to glue the blade into the handle, so I made these indents so that the blade would hopefully hold on a bit better. With the outline of the blade now finished, I used my calipers to mark down where I wanted the lines to be. I I started with roughing it up with a hand file. When the profile started to become what I wanted, I finished it up with the belt sander. The sanding took quite some time, but I was really happy with the result in the end. At this stage I was preparing the blade for quenching, and I wanted to make the finish as close to done as I could before doing that. I'm very glad no one saw me from the wrong angle right here. To quench the blade, my research had told me that I needed to warm the blade up to where it is no longer magnetic, and then cool it down with some preheated oil as fast as I could. I am using canola oil, or rapsolje as we say in Norway. In my first attempt I tried to warm it up with both a primus and a torch. Using this method I was not able to get more than one place to glow at a time. I tried to quench it nonetheless, and that did absolutely nothing. I'm using the knife to make the knife. For my second attempt I used coal. I found some rocks in my backyard to make a fireplace, and I had some water laying around for safety. Here I'm using the blower for my inflatable canoe to increase the oxygen that goes into the flames to get it even hotter. I needed to get the temperatures over 800 degrees Celsius, which happens to be just a bit hotter than your own mother. While the blade was heating up, I pre-warmed the canola oil to around 80 degrees Celsius on my primus, which is apparently important to do. Okay, here we go. The blade was now not magnetic anymore, which is an indication that the temperature is approximately correct. Did it work? Yeah, maybe a little bit. I think it's harder to scratch here than before, but I'm still able to scratch it quite easily with the file. And I believe the steel I had was not the right kind for this job. I decided to make the knife nonetheless, and moving on, I started with the CNC operation. I made this halfway decent Viking looking pattern that I wanted to engrave onto the knife. First I made the patterns inside a sketch, and then I made a path with the project function in Fusion. Once the program was done, I exported it from Fusion and imported it into G-Sender. First, I exported the part of the program that is cutting the general shape of the handle, where I used a 3.175mm CNC bit. Here you can see how it's looking in G-Sender whilst the CNC is cutting in real life. It has happened a few times that some error made the CNC lose its position. For example, the power has gone out, the stepper motor has lost some steps, or the stepper driver has been overheating. When this happens mid-cut, you have a problem. To make it a bit easier for myself, I cut a bit straight down when the CNC is at 0,0. That way I'm making a reference point I can later use to readjust the machine if needed. The wood I am using is some walnut I had left over from another project. The operation with the 3.175mm bit is now complete, and I need to change over to the 30-degree V-shaped bit. I am now doing my best not to push the gantry so that the stepper motors move over and loses some step. My CNC does not have any kind of encoder on any of the axi, and it is not able to tell whether it is in any other way than to remember how many steps the motors have taken. When changing the bit, I need to readjust the set height. I am doing this by moving the X and Y over to 0 and 0, and then moving the bit over to one side a little bit. And then I do the paper setup to find the 0. Now that the CNC operations are complete, I need to get the handle out. Here I'm thinking about if I should just remove the excess wood with the belt sander. And now I'm done with that thought, and I'm not going to do that. If you're hearing this, dear wife, this is why I need that bandsaw I have been talking about, as well as a bigger workshop, of course. The blade was a bit wide for the handle, so I needed to adjust it a little bit. Off camera, I drilled the hole into the handle. After a bit more sanding, I'm now close to the final look of the knife. Let me know when you spot the hole in the handle. For the finish of the knife, I am using some Rubio monocoat I had left over from when I built the guitar. And here we have the final result. Feel free to leave a like if you like the look of it, or if you learned something, and feel free to give me further advice and comments if you like. And thank you for watching.